Is it cheating to say that the anime with the hour-and-a-half premiere has the best first episode in anime history? Maybe just a little bit, but who cares, because honestly, it really just was. I can only imagine the experience of anime-only viewers going into this, because I'd read the manga and was still completely blown away by the adaptation. I've been gassing up the show before its release pretty heavily, but even then I was not even close to predicting how much soul would be put into this. The fact that it is practically 4 episodes long on its own is enough evidence that the people putting it together cared for the material that they were adapting, but Studio Doga Kobo and the Oshinoko staff really just put together a complete masterpiece. Of course, the source material itself was already pretty great, but to elevate it at a level further is truly something special. As far as the watching experience goes, I haven't felt this way about watching something since I first went through Clannad Afterstory, and while that itself as an experience I don't think will ever be replicated for me, this comes about as close that anything probably could. So why did this episode hit so hard for me and others? Well, let's break it down just a bit deeper. Typically, I like to talk about the writing of the characters when doing my videos, and I will be doing that, but I just want to get other things out of the way first, as I'm talking about the episode as a whole, and if I'm going to claim it to be the greatest first episode ever, I need to properly back that up. The art style chosen for the anime fits the manga pretty much perfectly as far as we've seen anyway. It's not over the top in terms of its backgrounds or anything like that, but I think that it just works out for the best. Oshinoko is a story about its characters, and that's where most of the attention is put. The star-filled eyes of the Hoshino family tell us everything we need to know in that regard. Our attention is and should be on them. I saw some people randomly complaining that the animation for like the first half of the episode wasn't anything special, and sure, while that's not technically wrong, I guess, it also doesn't really mean anything. It was consistent, and that's what matters, because the art and animation shine when they are called upon, when the characters need the focus on them more than any other moment, when it's their time to shine. We're forced to put them into view as the art style changes, and we acknowledge the emotions the scene is trying to convey. Whether it's Ruby learning to live, Ai learning to love, or Aqua's burning desire for revenge. All these moments have the emphasis put on them because it's what the adaptation understands that it needs to do to elevate its source material. It's meant to take the points in time that mean the most, the ones that we're supposed to give our undivided attention to, and to just put them on such a high pillar, to invoke all of the emotions that the author intends for us to feel, be it joy, sadness, or anger. The director, Daisuke Hiramaki, does a great job at deciding when to place these moments and how they should be handled overall. While we're on the topic of staff, it can't be understated just how important the voice acting was for this. Rie Takahashi especially is just a one-of-a-kind talent. Her work alone in this anime brought me as many tears as the moments themselves. Her words following the first "I love you" were delivered with such strong emotion, and it conveys so many feelings in that moment. Sadness and relief both wash over Ai as she realizes it's the end, but also realizing that her goal of knowing true love has been completed. The shaking in her voice during the delivery just really broke me down. Moving to more of the writing-based aspects, in terms of elevating the source material, I think the structure of the anime does actually a better job than the manga when it comes to telling the prologue, all because of one simple change. In the manga, there were some flash-forwards that I'm not going to go into detail about in the event that they reintroduce them later, but sometimes it felt like they could take you out of the moment. The prologue is about learning who the characters we're following are, why we should care or be invested in them at all. The anime chooses instead to focus on Ai's story entirely because in the end, that's what the prologue is about. Through the eyes of Aqua, we get to watch over Ai as she grows as an idol and person until the bitter end where her perspective takes hold and her final moments steal the show and break our hearts. Now, we can't talk about structure without also talking about the plot itself. It should be noted, of course, that the adaptation doesn't change anything story or character-wise, so whenever I refer to those sort of things, it's praise for the overall series and not just the anime, but that much should be obvious. The story for Oshinoko is one that subverts the expectations of the viewer multiple times. At first, we believe it will be a story about the struggles Ai and her doctor will face, but it turns around and throws that idea right into the gutter as Goro is killed and reincarnates as Aqua along with Saruna as Ruby. From there, you expect it to follow Ai through the lens of her children, but it becomes evident in the writing that it is setting up Aqua and Ruby to work in the entertainment industry, so you get the feeling that maybe it'll be about them taking up their mother's mantle instead. But of course, all of that comes crashing down when we lose Ai to her stalker, and the wholesome ideas we had all just burn away into nothing as the true story of Oshinoko is revealed. As far as plots go, it's not like a revenge story is anything particularly special on its own, but in reality, no plot is. At their base core is pretty pretty much every plot you can ever think up has been done to some degree. It's about how the author portrays the story that makes it unique. Plot structures combined with interesting characters being put into different settings is the essence of fresh storytelling. Aqua's revenge isn't just finding someone and getting the job done. There's a complicated pillar to climb between him and his ultimate goal, and that's the entertainment industry. We were shown through the entire episode the struggles that even someone as talented as I had to go through in order to reach the position that she did. Aqua will be no different. The cruelty of reality is a backdrop for this show to make the mystery of who their father is that much more difficult to solve. Might actually be easier to be in a typical mystery where you just have to find odd clues in order to solve the case. Aqua now has to be one of the absolute best to climb his way up the chain and complete his goal. It's a compelling way to show the ugliness of the industry that wants to be viewed as beautiful, while also telling a narrative that people can be emotionally invested into. But honestly, what better way to invest people than to make a cast that you just honestly want the best for? It would be great if I was able to talk about the entire cast of characters, but I have only 3 that I can really talk about here in the prologue. Sorry, best girl. The Hoshino family is just such an interesting character trichotomy. For those of you who don't understand such a scary word like trichotomy, let me explain. A trichotomy can simply be described as a contrast divided into 3 sections, hence the tri, or as a contrast between 3 entities. Personally, I feel like while the family does share similarities, of course, all of them come from completely different walks of life. Sarina never got the chance to grow, Ai is figuring out how, and Goro has been through the motions. And even as Sarina becomes Ruby and Goro becomes Aqua, it stays in a division. I do, however, want to talk about all 3 on an individual level as well. We'll start things off with Sarina/Ruby. Rock bottom does not even begin to describe where she starts off. A girl robbed of her future by bad luck, her parents don't pay her any mind, and the thing that she admires most in the world is just entirely out of her reach. This sort of bleeds into the character of Goro/Aqua as well, but I wanted to mention it here. While she had no hope realistically of doing anything she wanted, the person she loved second to Ai was always there to provide her comfort in some sort of way, even if in the end they were empty statements that both people knew held no truth. This leans into the lies being love theme, of course, but it's just such a bittersweet part of their character dynamic. If she becomes an idol, Goro will be her fan, and if she makes it to 16, he would consider marrying her. Such lies are easy to see through for us and the character, but to her, those lies mean everything, because they're the only joy she can latch onto that isn't on a screen. She can hold on to the lies because she lives in the moment. We see this when Aqua mentions that she should be giving her future some thought, and it hits her that she'd simply never considered her future at all, even when being given a second chance at life. We as people take the simple things for granted and look towards the future as we try to find gratification in our lives, but she looks at the present, trying to soak up all the joys that she never had the chance to experience. This all culminates in her dance recital. Ruby was terrified of the thought because she just simply wasn't bad at dancing. She had never had the chance to try. Any physical movement she would attempt sent her literally and figuratively crashing back down to earth in her old life. The difference this time is that there's a second supporter in her corner. Of course, Aqua is there for her, but something she didn't have before. A loving parent was right by her side the whole way. She didn't need to brace for her falls because her guiding light is like the North Star itself, following the person she loved most before and still does in an all new way. Her old dream joins with her current life as Ai directs her down the right path. The talent was there, she just needed a little push, and she was given that. Aqua is a bit of a complicated character because none of his issues are really surface level like the other 2. At the start, he's mostly defined by the sort of blink and you miss it type of lines. He was a successful person to some degree as a doctor, obviously, but the one thing he found that he really wanted to work for was ripped away from him, and it took until the one he substituted in her place to show up for him to find that spark again. Aqua seemed indifferent about his reincarnation, but says something important that most people might have just looked over, and that would be his gratefulness to the killer for giving him his new life. Sure, you can chalk that up to him just being happy with Ai, but thinking about the stress that doctors go through is enough to understand why maybe he was a bit unhappy with his life and was looking for some sort of change. He's more than content to switch gears and be Ai's support. In a roundabout way, he also hasn't really been thinking about his future. He landed his acting gig through pure chance, and then because it was beneficial to Ai, he went through with it, but he didn't give it much thought outside of that. Trying to figure himself out was something completely secondary. This is made even more obvious after Ai's death, where Aqua wonders if this new life is even worth continuing. He had already lived a bit of life before, and he experienced death, so what more did he really need? The end of the prologue is the real start to his character though, as the sudden realization of the events surrounding Ai's death lit a spark in him to light his way forward as his star had burned out. He has his fair share of problems on a deeper level that he'll have to work out eventually, because there's only one thing to be found when someone lives their life in search of someone else's death, and that's trouble. Last up, we have the obvious star of the prologue in Ai. As I said earlier, pretty much everything is focused on her here, the true star of the show. It's so interesting to see idols portrayed in the way that they are in the show, as typically you'll see them as a purely good thing with no background issues, when the reality shows that's just not the case. Idol culture is a toxic thing, and Oshinoko does not hide from that. That's why it fits Ai so well though. She's a dysfunctional person in a dysfunctional industry. It's just the perfect match. Having no one to truly call family, it makes sense that she would make the bold choice to keep her children and risk everything, just on the chance that she can learn to love. And her idol career is built on that same basis. She'll lie and lie until one day she finds her own truth, and hopefully in that truth, all of her lies become reality. Ai calls herself greedy, but she'd never had anything to begin with, so who can blame her for wanting more? Idol activities take up her time, but unlike her own parents, she isn't absent from the life of her kids. Busyness isn't an excuse for her because she'll work to make them feel loved, to try and find that love for herself. Perhaps something you could call greedy is that she wanted to love everyone. She mentions herself that one day she may pay for an ideal like that, but it was something she wanted to try regardless. Of course, she does pay in one of the most gut-wrenching scenes that I think you'll see in anime. The focus had always been on her. The lights, the camera, the media attention, all of it focused on Ai, but at the end of her life, as she was unfairly robbed of her bright future, she puts all the focus on her kids. As a child, she never felt love, and so in her final moments, she let them know that they had all of hers. Her worries had to be put aside. She had to see if the lies had become the truth. Complimenting Ruby's dance, speculating on how they'll grow up, reflecting on her performance as a mother. Her life was lived for them, and as she said, "I love you," her character was complete. She had learned to love. Even if her life didn't go the way she wanted it to, she let them know that they were loved and always would be. The stars in her eyes burned out, but the fire she lit in the two she left behind grew. Ruby wants to shine the same way that I did, even if it's harder or the more dangerous path. And of course, Aqua will gladly throw away his life as well in honor of her. Three people who live completely different lives all came together to build a relationship that would fuel all of them. Time will tell if Ruby and Aqua can be truly happy in the end, but as for Ai, she did her job well. And finally, she can rest easy knowing that she too can love. I firmly believe this opening episode to be the greatest of all time for anime, and honestly, maybe just anything in general. Apart from everything I talked about, I won't lie, tears ran down my face working on this script as I typed and watched the scenes back. I'm glad that Oshinoko got a loving adaptation, because it truly deserved one, and I'm beyond excited to see how this team adapts the rest of the season, because Wednesdays just got a whole lot more exciting.